welcome to the Daily Obsession. My name is Jim the Fish.
I'm Millennial Off. I'm back again.
Alrighty, welcome back, Millennial Loft. How's it been?
It's been a while, surprisingly.
Well, since we recorded, you were actually on the last 5 episodes of our podcast, I think.
I don't know.
So, honestly, at this point, we might as well just put you in as the co-host of the show.
Woo!
Congratulations on the promotion. So anyway, we're going to be talking about classical music today.
Right. Okay.
Okay, classical music. I'm actually a huge fan of classical music, though. I have been for a long time. Though I didn't actually like music for most of my life. I think when I was 13, I started enjoying music, and then the first radio station I actually fell in love with was 105.9. They're a classical radio station based in New York that I discovered because I borrowed a car with a handbrake for my driver's test, and that happened to be the radio station that was on. Very calming, despite the fact that, I failed the test the first time. But, it kept me generally calm. So what classical music do you enjoy?
I'm very mixed. For most people, when they hear classical music, they think of those big, orchestras that were written by people who have been dead for centuries. But, classical does include also movie soundtracks. So a lot of the classical I'm into tends to be movie soundtracks. But I have a couple of odd ones out there. I'm also a fan of the classics, the Can, Carmen Opera Suite, I think 15. The William Tell Overture.
Oh, the Blue Danube Waltz, the Danube Waltz.
Yep.
The River Danube. So, it's something like
yeah,
that.
you got it the first time.
All right. I'm not a huge fan of that one, so I mean, it is on actually one of my playlists, but I skip over it. It's one of the ones that you add just because it fits. Though, personally, my favorites are Beethoven, who, in my opinion, is the greatest composer to have ever lived. Mozart, complete garbage. Do not enjoy his music. I do enjoy 2 of his songs. I enjoy his Requiem Lacrimosa and his Queen of the Night aria. Aside from that, I think his music is just bland and emotionless. Where, as you look at something like Moonlight Sonata or Für Elise, or really any of Beethoven's symphonies, you just feel the passion that went into writing it. I also enjoy Chopin. Chopin? I never knew how to pronounce his name. Though I'm sure that there's many people who do know and would yell at me for pronouncing it wrong every single time.
Hey, at least you didn't say choppin'.
Choppin'. Oh yeah, dudes love that choppin', man. So, I mean, his music is really limited to piano solos, so I do enjoy that because I play a little bit of piano, and what he does is very ethereal, I think is the best word for it. It's very light and flowing, but powerful at the same time. It's very enjoyable. My personal favorite of his is his operatic number 9. It's a very good piece. I highly suggest it. I think the best thing about classical music is that it's not like copyrighted in a way. Now, I know that sounds weird, but what I mean by that is that it's not one person has the song and nobody else is allowed to play it. The people who wrote the songs have been dead for so many years that you can find 18 different versions of the same song, and they're all played slightly differently.
They're getting ripped off.
Oh yeah, they're getting very ripped. But the other day I was looking to listen to Vivaldi's Winter, and I was like, I'm not a huge fan of the version I have on my playlist anymore. So I looked it up, and I found a playlist on Spotify of 18 different versions of Vivaldi's Winter. The playlist was just called Vivaldi's Winter, and it was just every version the person could find on Spotify of that song. And I worked my way through the playlist to find the one I liked, and the version I settled on was an electric guitar remix by a band called Darkmoor, I believe. So
Oh my.
it was very good. It is very good. And that's the best part because you go on YouTube, you go on Spotify, you can find a million versions of any song you would want to listen to, each played in a slightly different way because the same song can be played happy or sad or angry. So depending on your emotion, you can really find a version of any song to go for your emotions. So that's kind of cool, I think.
Now, I actually have a question for you for once.
Oh.
What is your favorite classical instrument? Like, what's the thing you look forward to when you hear like an orchestra,
Well,
or like a section? Maybe not like a specific instrument, but like a section that you're interested.
yeah, because I'm very partial to the piano, mostly because I play a little bit, so I understand at least to the smallest amount what's going on with that instrument. But my favorite thing to listen to in an orchestra or in a group setting is strings. I love the cello because that's a really deep, full sound that when you have somebody who's really good at that, playing really complicated pieces on a cello, or even just really simple pieces really well, it just comes off with something that's because okay, when you have a viola or a violin, I love the sounds that they make. It's that distinct vibrato that really comes with being a string instrument. But it almost feels too light sometimes. Like the pieces don't have the energy. I mean, the violin doesn't have the energy needed to take on the piece, while something like a cello is just more full bodied and has more power behind it almost. Obviously, I don't know anything about these instruments because I don't play them. I also don't know almost anything about music in general. But from an amateur perspective, somebody who just enjoys listening to it, I find that the cello is better on the ears than the violin because it sometimes is a bit more shrill. I really do enjoy the brass section, though you'd be a bit more of an expert on that.
Yes. I mean, at one point I played the trombone. I remember when I first picked up an instrument for a small middle school band. I picked up the trumpet, but by fourth grade, my diaphragm was already so low that I actually couldn't handle the higher notes of the instrument. So I had to switch down to a trombone, which better fit my diaphragm. Now, over time, my diaphragm has continued to get lower, and that's the big thing about brass instruments. The lower your diaphragm, the lower the instrument. So I'd probably be really good at like a tuba right now, just because of how low my diaphragm has gotten over time. Horn section is always my absolute favorite when it comes to any piece that I listen to. I just absolutely love when you do a nice like soft part to the horns, or when the horns are used properly to give that kind of blasting feel out of the music.
Yeah.
And I do have a particular favorite instrument, which is the French horn, which gives you that
Really?
nice. It has a much smoother sound because the way it works is you insert your hand like a cone into the bell to kind of soften the sound as you play.
I didn't know that. That's very interesting.
And it creates such a beautiful soft sound, but that's still like not like a flute or like a wind section.
It's got
instrument.
that brass character to it, but just smoother and more flowing. I think the best piece I can think of that uses the horns as properly as you put it, with that big punch, is Scheherazade. If you've ever heard that.
I don't think I have.
The original play, I suppose, or story of Scheherazade is that she was one in a long line of wives to an Arabic king who would get tired of his wives very quickly and have them killed. So, in an effort to save her own life, every single night she would tell a story and end it on a cliffhanger. And she did this for 1,000 nights, I think. So 1,001 Arabian Nights. That's the name of it. Her name was Scheherazade, and she managed to make the king fall in love with her by keeping herself alive by telling stories with cliffhangers.
Hmm.
So they used the horns to symbolize the king's power and prestige, and they used a violin to symbolize Scheherazade and her skill at, because the violin is a very skilled but small instrument.
Mm-hmm.
So they used that to show the skill but small stature of Scheherazade in keeping herself alive with the stories, which I love because, I mean, pop music, rock music, they all have their qualities, but you're not really getting a story out of it.
That's it. With music, the funny thing about it is when I think of music, immediately the first thing that comes to mind is this is a version of storytelling. In fact, some of the earliest forms of music were just oral tradition, but with a little flair. And for people who don't know what oral tradition is, it's passing down stories and tales via speech and music sometimes. So the big thing is whenever I listen for a piece, if there's no story behind it, then quite frankly, I'm just not interested. And that's why I honestly don't like most modern music, because it's either the same story or there's no story at all.
Yeah, and with classical music, everything was written almost with a purpose, because when you're not using words, though some classical music did use words, though we're referring more to the instrumental side, it was giving each instrument its own part to tell. So you'd have a piece like For Elise tells a love story without ever using a single word, just by using different progressions and movements of the fingers across the piano to show the different feelings that Beethoven had for his love Elise. Though Beethoven, as amazing as he is, his history is so weird and nobody really knows anything. Everything's just guesses, so I kind of think that's cool. Have a little mystery behind the man. I don't know. Classical music, just in general, has a wide base because it was around. It's basically anything that was around before, I guess, the 1900s. Because once music.
Well, 1900s is.
Well, I mean 1900s. I was in 1900 to 2000, not 1800.
I would argue maybe mid 1800s, because in.
When did music stop being classical music? That's a good question.
That's a wonderful question, and the thing is, it depends on the invention of different instruments. Like
That's a fair point.
In the mid 1800s, in the west of America, you saw the invention or the formation of certain instruments. Like the earliest version of a guitar started in Spain with the loop, but just a little fancier. And then it transferred over to America, and in about I want to say the mid 1800s, we see the invention of the banjo. Yes, that is a very old instrument.
I guess I never really considered the history of a banjo as
but
that big.
You start to see music change as string instruments are no longer something that has to be played with the bow. It can be strummed or plucked. And that's really where you start to see the change from classical, I guess.
I wonder what the definition of classical music is, but either way.
I guess we could Google it.
I'm going to Google it. What exactly makes music classical music?
I don't have anything to play in the interlude, so I guess you're just going to have to listen to me hum. Dun, 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 dun,
Hey, my phone is not working.
dun,
Do you want to look it up?
dun, dun,
And I'll make the horrible intermission noises.
dun.
Classical music, man. But, yeah, I mean, I think Beethoven was one of the first people to actually compose for the piano, if I remember correctly. I think it was invented around
What is
the
considered classical music, according to Wikipedia?
There's nothing wrong with Wikipedia.
Alright, well, classical music, ... Wonderful explanation. Classical music is a very general term which normally refers to standard music of countries in the Western world. It is music that has been composed by musicians who are trained in the art of writing music, composing, and written down in music notation so that other musicians can play it.
That
Is
That's-
very broad.
that literally
That
just
is-
means music in general.
Yeah, let's...
Congratulations, Justin Bieber. Your music is officially classical.
What are the characteristics of classical music? Indeed. What? Why did you start out with indeed? Classical music greatly emphasizes homophonic melodies, meaning that there was a single melody that all of the instruments played instead of layered melodies of the Baroque period.
I don't get that at all.
Neither do I.
Well-
Music is messy.
I am not a music major, nor do I know anything about music. So
Neither do I. I make mine up by humming something in my head and then trying to translate it onto the program I have. I'm not at all talented in the ways of music.
I'm sure that's not true. But either way, yeah, classical music. That was our episode. So thank you for listening. This has been The Daily Obsession. I'm Jim the Fish.
I'm Millennial Loft.
And that's it for today.